Hi, it's Dee from Inspired Health by Dee, and I'm really excited to be here today to chat with you about endometriosis and hope. I wanted to welcome my guest today, Yong-Li. Welcome today. I'm excited that you're here.
Thanks for having me, Dee.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So I guess for me, with my own endometriosis journey, when I was right in the middle of it, I found that I was really struggling and I was in a lot of pain and I didn't have hope for the future. I thought that I would always be in pain and that endo would always rule my life. Whereas if you fast forward to where I am now, my own endo is well managed, I'm pain free, and endo doesn't rule my life. And I work with a lot of women with endo in my naturopathic clinic, and I'm active in a lot of the Facebook groups. And I just see that there's so many women suffering, and there isn't as much of the message of hope, because the women that are in those groups are there supporting each other and they're in the middle of their journey. And I thought, well, how can I provide hope back to the endometriosis community? And I thought, well, why not interview other women who have endo, who are doing amazing things in their own communities, with their families, with their careers, the things that matter to them, and share their message and their story, and also their message of hope. So I'm excited to hear your journey and story and message today. So did you want to start off by telling us a little bit about your endo story?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, thank you for this opportunity to speak, because I think my story resonates probably a lot with other people out there. I mean, we find commonality in the stories. So I actually think my endo story began when I first started getting my period. So I was about 12 and a half when I first started getting my period. And one of the things they teach you in school is that, periods when you first get them are going to be irregular. So, it was about 4 or 5 months until I got my next one. But the thing is that my periods basically stayed irregular throughout high school up until even now. And I never thought of it as an issue. And I guess you're also taught that pain is normal as well. But I think the problem with pain is that nobody can quantify, how much pain is too much pain, or what pain you're feeling might be, how significant your pain is compared to somebody else's. It's all very individual. So you're kind of taught that, to suck it up because it's just normal. But it kind of got to about year 12, end of year 11 into beginning of year 12, when my mum was like, look, I don't want you stressing about your periods, because mind you, in high school, you go through high school, you're the girl that has to carry spare uniforms, like pads on you at all times, because I could, have a period every 6 weeks, but then the next time it's 2 weeks. So it was kind of one of those things, you just never know when it was going to happen. So my mum was like, look, let's get maybe some medical assistance just to help you regulate this and just to take the edge and the stress off things, because you're going through year 12 already. So we did that, made basically an appointment with the GP. GP's like, cool, look, let's put you on Levlin, and let's see how you go. Let's see how this regulates you. It didn't regulate me. If anything, it gave me nausea. So on top of year 12, you're going through this motions of nausea. So that didn't work. So the next option is, let's try something else. And then you go to the Yasmin. But for the first time in my life with that, I ended up with like the driest skin, flaky skin. And I was like, this can't be it. Like, this can't be the solution to it. So unfortunately, my year 12 was a mixture of what was basically spent trying different contraceptive pills just to try and help me regulate my period. And none of those worked. So it kind of got to the end of year 12, and my mum had actually just started seeing a gynecologist around that same time. And she was diagnosed with endo. So this was the first time we had heard about it. We knew it was something. Because I guess, the other thing is my mum had suffered from heavy periods all her life as well. And, she was, 45 at the time? So you're thinking at least 30 something years of suffering with this, and nobody ever mentions to you what it could be. So first she got diagnosed with endo. She had her surgery. And I remember thinking, like, is this something I could have too? Is it hereditary? And I asked our GP, you know, like, is it hereditary? She goes, well, it's not clinically proven, but we are seeing signs, and you know, that it could be. There's strong evidence to show that it might. So I was like, well, I want to go and investigate this. And so she sent me off to a gynecologist, same gynecologist as my mum was seeing. And at the time, I was 19 years old, so I was in my first year of uni. And she basically said, look, the thing is, what we would do is we send you for an ultrasound, we'll see if there's anything going on. And sure enough, because of the age I was, and at the time I hadn't had sex yet, they couldn't do an internal ultrasound. So they did an external one. And what we know now is that external ones don't have as much, or aren't as, you know, don't get as much of a clear image as internal ultrasounds. Yeah. So, you know, they did that. They said, oh, everything looks fine, but yeah, there's maybe this little polyp here that looks a bit interesting. So we'll keep our eye on that. Sure enough, though, my gynecologist saw the reports, and she's like, look, there's nothing to suggest it, but we're not going to know until we kind of go in and have a look. So we scheduled a laparoscopy in my mid-semester holidays, which is, I think, like 2-3 weeks, like 2-3 weeks of holidays. And so we had that, did that. And I just remember waking up, like, feeling like shivering. I was coming out of it. I couldn't open my eyes. I was shivering. And all I just could hear her saying was like, look, she was saying to either like another nurse or somebody else in the theatre. She's like, look, we need to organize a bed for her. She needs to stay overnight. She was under for much longer than we anticipated. And I just remember being like, hey, I'm feeling a bit cold. Can I get a blanket? And she's like, no, dear, you're going through shock. Your body's in shock. Oh. And I was like, cool, but can I still get that blanket?
Cold.
I'm still cold, but like, yeah. And so yeah, that was like kind of it. And she basically, you know, they go through, they tell you that, you know, your endo was probably one of the worst cases we had seen for somebody your age. And, you know, you're told all your life that it's perfectly normal what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, and that it's just your hormones that are imbalanced. Well, now you know that endometriosis could cause hormonal imbalance as well. So it's like, which is what? So that was my first laparoscopy. And kind of like throughout the next 4 years, I was on Zoli for a period of time, for about 2-3 years. And for those who know about Zoli or don't know about Zoli, is that it's a contraceptive pill, but it's on the more expensive side of things. It's almost like $80-90 for 3 months worth of pills. Whereas, you know, you look at something like Levin, which is like $10 to $15 for 4 months worth of pills. So it's not a cheap disease to have, so to say. And on top of that, I was still experiencing like the heavy menstrual cycles. I was still experiencing irregularity, spotting. And so I was constantly getting checked, you know, checked every 6 to 12 months, having an internal ultrasound now by this point, just to see what was going on. But the thing is, they tell you and they go in and have a look and they're like, look, everything seems to be moving fine. We can't see anything on these ultrasounds. Look, you're you know, everything is clinically fine. So I was like, cool, okay. So kind of in between that point, I was like, look, maybe I need to start finding something else out there. You know, there must be something that can help me manage my pain, because my pain got to the point where I was having, you know, it started up in my left hip and it would travel all the way down into my ankle and all the way up into my shoulder and my head and my, you know, my jaw, and my head. And it was sort of, you know, that time, a week before I got my period until I got my period, and a week after my period finished, that, you know, you're experiencing this pain. And so you get like just a few days of relief before it all starts up again. Yeah, exactly. So I had kind of self-diagnosed and like, look, this is probably due to my period. So what else is out there that I can do to help me manage this? And that's when I started to see a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. And that was great for a time being, because you think you're doing something, but I got really sick of taking the herbal medicines.
Oh, they taste amazing, don't they?
They're the best thing in the world.
Yes, I've also experienced it, and I do prescribe some herbal medicine, some Chinese herbs.
Look,
Yeah.
I think like, sort of in hindsight, knowing where I was probably at that point, I don't think, doing what I did and go into the traditional Chinese medicine, go into the functional doctor, was going to help me manage my pain, because my endo had come back with a vengeance. It was one of those things where I think it may have, prevented it from spreading, but it's not something you're going to know, unfortunately, because for me, it was, I could only get diagnosed when I had laparoscopies.
Yeah.
So I got sick of the traditional Chinese medicine. Was like, there must be something else. I saw a functional doctor, and again, she was great. And I had started reading about how endo was an inflammatory disease, how diet and an anti-inflammatory diet could assist in pain management and things like that. But again, it just kind of got to a point where I was like, I'm not seeing much benefit. I'm not feeling much better. I mean, maybe a little bit better, but not to the extent where I'm like, cool, I think I'm pain-free. It was more like, ooh, I can maybe get through this month without having to be in bed for a few days. That was about it. So I was like, look, I'm going to see my gynecologist again, and we're going to, discuss my options. So saw her again. And I guess throughout the 4 years that I hadn't really done anything since my first laparoscopy, she's always raised and was very hesitant to operate on me too often, mainly because, operations cause scar tissue. So at this 4th year, she was like, look, I think it is maybe time that we operate on you again. We have a look, we see what's happening, we make sure your tubes are cleared and flushed and like they're all working. And I was like, cool, let's do that. And she's like, and we'll also put a Mirena in you, because none of the contraceptive other pills had been working, but Mirena had been showing some positive results. So I was like, cool, I'll do that. Let's do that. So again, at the end of 2017, I was scheduled in for my second laparoscopy. And I again remember waking up from that, and I was just in so much pain. I was like, wow, I definitely had endo. Because again, you're not told, you don't know until you're told by your surgeon whether something was excised or not. So I was like, yep, I think I'm staying again. I'm staying another night. And that's exactly what happened. And when my gynecologist surgeon finally came to see me, she was like, look, you had endo grow in all new spots. They're not regrowths, they're brand new spots. And she goes, for a 4-year period, like it was pretty intense. So I was like, I knew it. I knew there was something wrong. So it kind of provided me with like that relief and that sense of like, like it's not just in my head. And yeah, so, and at the same time when she was telling me like, look, you have all this endo in these new spots. If you see children in your future, I would highly recommend you begin trying to conceive within the next 12 months. And I was like in that recovery room in one of those chairs, recovery chairs, like quite drugged up and sedated, and I had tears forming around my eyes. I'm like, can I push it to 3? I asked her, she's like, I wouldn't push it. I wouldn't risk it. And I think for me, I was 23, 24, just turned 24 at the time. And when you're told that, so I have my own business. I had a growing business. I had just, met a man. So I was only 6 months into a relationship. And these are the things that you think about, like when you're told, oh, you probably got to have kids in the next year. And you're like, but, and so you're trying you're trying to like comprehend all of that and thinking, how am I going to make this work? And so my then boyfriend came in with like a bunch of flowers that night, coming to visit me, and my mum's like, you guys have to have babies.
Oh, thanks, Mum.
I was like, I didn't even get to say anything, but like she's like, yeah, you guys gotta have babies. And I just remember like after they visited, once they all had to leave the hospital, I just remember them telling me that they spent the evening in a restaurant just drinking wine together and just probably talking about the future and having to have babies. And I'm like, I'm not part of this conversation, but here we go. So yeah, so sure enough, it was, you know, within less than a year from that surgery, I got engaged. I got married, planned a wedding, got married, went on a honeymoon, and I had my marina taken out that was put in at that surgery. And very luckily, I got pregnant quite quickly. So I am now sitting like 2 years later, almost, you know, with a 2-year-old. Yeah, with a somewhat managed endo now. And that's sort of my story up until now.
Did you end up putting the marina back in after you were pregnant?
I did. Yeah, I did. So I had about 6 months after I gave birth where I wasn't getting periods. But when I started to get my periods again, they came back and they were just as bad as they were before. You know, with days where I'd have to be sitting in, like just lying down in my bed with as many heat packs as I could keep with me. And, you know, I had a TENS machine because through pregnancy, I used to through my labor, I used a TENS machine. I'm like, oh, this is going to be useful. So I used it even like while I was having my periods. And it got to a point where I was like, look, I do want a second child eventually. I don't want to risk me having these heavy bleeds causing endo to come back or to, you know. So I just scheduled in an appointment. I was like, look, I'm going to get the marina in because for me, the marina, although it didn't stop my periods, it significantly reduced the amount I bled. And I also had adenomyosis. So it also significantly reduced that and the severity of that. So I know for me, it somewhat worked.
Wow, thank you for sharing. Yes, there's so many points there. The whole period pain is normal, is so common. Like we get told that it's normal to have pain, and it goes back further. It goes back to our mothers and it goes back to our grandmothers because that's what they were taught as well. So then they don't know any different to teach us that it's not actually normal. And then because it can be, there's like that hereditary link, they dealt with it the best that they knew how as well. And often that ended up being, I think, you know, with the grandparents' generation,
yeah.
especially, it ended up being that it was they just did a hysterectomy and then that was it.
Yep.
And so then they just say, oh well, that's just how it is. You're supposed to have pain with your period. And like you said, it's maybe a little bit of pain, maybe a little bit of uncomfortable, but not to that point where you were saying where you only have a short window of relief like that. It's not supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
Really, really important message, I guess, to share with every woman, with the younger generation as well. So that
I mean, just to make a point, like my gynecologist, I remember when I first started seeing her, she's like, you can take Panadol, Naprogesic, Nurofen, all at the same time if you want. And I was like, cool, but maybe no thanks. And you know, and sort of to go back to your point as well about generations and the way they dealt with pain. Like I have a cousin now, and she says she gets pretty bad, you know, menstrual pains. And I've always said to her, I'm like, maybe, you know, why don't you just take some Panadol and Nurofen? And she's like, well, Mama won't let me because she says it's, you know, period, because she says childbirth is going to be worse. And I'm like,
oh.
No way. I was like, I am so I hope that one day you will have enough autonomy over your own body to make that choice. But you know, I can say hands down that I went through an emergency induced labor, and for the first 12 hours I was fine, mainly because the pain that I experienced during labor and the contractions I felt was almost on par with what I felt when I got my periods. The only reason why I would say labor was worse is because I had, 7 contractions happening within a span of like 10 minutes and one on top of each other. Whereas, you get your period and that's, you get one here and then a few more minutes or a few hours later, you get another one. So that's the only reason why I would say, labor was worse. But, that's my experience. And to think that, you can deny someone relief of that. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And yeah, you shouldn't be in that much pain when you have your period. No. And I hope that by having more of these conversations and women being much more open, that the story starts to change, so that way women know that pain is an indication that, well, maybe an indication that something's going on, so they start to get that early intervention. Because then that comes back to, like what you said, being told at 23 that you have to have a baby really soon, that's a really, really full-on conversation to have. That's full-on.
I think it is as well. It's especially when you're kind of told that, or you're in that generation where women generally are having babies later. So just for example, like, at the hospital I delivered at, the average age of a woman delivering her first baby was 37. And I was 25, I just turned 26. So that's at least 10 years, 11 years difference. So I think kind of going into it, if we're told maybe that our bodies aren't designed to have children by a certain age or at a certain age, or if we have that sort of education around it as well, maybe we comprehend it at a younger age, maybe comprehend, and so it's not as much of a shock when when we're faced with that. And most definitely, like, trying to get awareness out there. That's sort of, the number of times I've spoken to women or to friends and they're like, I have pain, and I'm like, have you considered going to see someone about it? And then the number of times actually that women come back to me and say, I have endo now too. And I'm like, well, thank God you have a diagnosis and you can do something about it. So, and
I know that the conversation about egg freezing is becoming a lot more open as well, because it's like you said, if it's okay if you want to be younger and then have a career, that's okay. But then there are the options around that you can actually freeze your younger eggs so that then you can have a baby later too, because you just don't think about it. It's not something that you think about. And then to hear, well, now you need to have a baby really soon, it's so full on.
Yeah, it is. It was. It most definitely was.
To your partner as well.
I'm lucky that, like, he took it so well. Like, that could have gone one in two ways. It could have been like, yes, I'll stay with you forever, which is what he did. Or it could have been like, bye.
Bye. See ya.
Nice knowing you. And then what would I have done then? So I'm very, very fortunate to have had, the support from him, but also my family, and saying, like, look, like I said, my business was in a phase of growth. So I have a skincare business, and for them to be like, look, we will help you take on whatever you need assistance with. We know you want a family, so go do that. Go have your family, and we'll be here to support you in anything that we need. So, yeah, awesome. I'm very, very fortunate.
So you mentioned that you tried the nutrition and the traditional Chinese medicine. Is that something that you incorporate now as well?
Not so much the traditional Chinese medicine, mainly because it was involved a lot of like visiting them to get like sort of the dry needling, acupuncture, and herbs. If I can try to avoid, I avoid, most definitely. But in terms of what I saw with the nutrition side, we try to eat. I generally thought my diet was pretty good, but we try to eat the more alkaline foods, things that are less things that are more anti-inflammatory. Reducing the amount of red meat we eat didn't significantly help too. So all these little things that I picked up on the way, I try and ensure that I keep them in my daily schedule. So like now I start my day with a green smoothie because that's the best way to sort of pack it all in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a similar experience with you with my own journey. Was that as a naturopath, I have access to those herbal medicines and things. And when my endo was really bad, I saw a Chinese medicine practitioner who I did acupuncture with. But I was similar to you. It was so bad. This was before I'd been diagnosed, but I had a feeling that that's what it was. It was quite bad. So it reduced the pain to a certain point, and it gave me relief. But it was never going to give me, I was never going to be pain-free at that point because it was just too bad. I ended up being diagnosed with stage 4 and then possible adeno as well. And, but then I find that once I had my surgery, it was almost like a clean slate. So then I could implement all those things now. So I know that surgery for me was a big, obviously a big factor because it removed the endo, but then there's all those other things that I do now, like with nutrition, and I do take herbs, but not liquid ones, other ones, a little bit better to digest. And then I know that there's all those other things in my toolbox if I need them too. So there's always the acupuncture. I haven't tried the TENS machine, but I know that a lot of women really get a lot of relief from that, like at the point where they have pain. So I guess there's so many options. I don't think there's any one thing that's going to work to manage it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's very personal as well. So one thing that I also did is I have a friend who is a physiotherapist, but for a while she worked as a pain management clinics. And, you know, I just talked to her about the pain I was experiencing, and she kind of taught me and brought this whole new level of like knowledge about central nervous system, and, you know, rewiring the brain to and how it responds to pain. And for me, that has actually been like a really big help, because, you know, that's something that I know I can do on a daily basis to try and improve. And slowly, like you'll see month to month that, oh, I am maybe feeling a little bit better. Unfortunately, because my triggers are on a monthly basis, you're not going to necessarily see them like right away. But, you know, it's better doing something than nothing.
And that's how I feel. I figured I didn't want to be having that surgery every year or every 2 years. If there were things that I could do in between, and this is what I teach my clients as well, is that there's so much things in your control that you can do. You can control your nutrition, you can control your stress, you know, your environment, if you live like a low toxic lifestyle. There's so many things that are within your control, and I wanted to make sure that I could do all those things to push the surgery out as far as possible. I know that at some point I'll probably have to have another one, and that's okay, but it's expensive too.
It is. And I guess seeing just your specialist is even expensive as well. But I guess I'm like, we're very lucky to have access to that. But, you know, I'm very lucky that my gynecologist kind of was like, you know, surgery is absolutely last option. You know, she was always very pro, go see the physiotherapist, go see, you know, this and do that before you come back to me. So I'm very lucky on that end to have had that kind of honesty. Yeah.
So did, just out of curiosity, so did your friend teach you about like pacing?
No.
Or
pacing.
Like strategies around, I guess, I think different people explain it in different ways, but like the whole Spoony Theory, have you heard about that?
No, teach me.
So there's this thing in with chronic disease to say that you have, everybody, this is the analogy they use. You have a certain amount of spoons to use in a day, and this is how they describe it. So you have a certain amount of spoons in a day, and if you're a healthy, fit person, you can go through your day and you have multiple spoons left over. But when you have a chronic disease, you only really have a capacity for a certain amount of things to do. So you might say that like getting up and having a shower and going to work, and then maybe going for a walk, that's your limit. Whereas if you're a healthy person, you can have, you can do multiple things. You can go to the gym in the morning, you can get ready, have a busy day at work, then you can go out at night and then maybe have less hours sleep, and you're still okay because you're not dealing with a chronic disease. And so a lot of pain specialists explain it in different ways. Pacing is another one, is that you've got to understand that you have limits and that you can if you understand your limits, then you're much more likely, I guess, it's like a coping mechanism. You can put things in place so that you understand where your limits are, so you're not overextending yourself. Because if you're stressed, then there's the pain triggers and the endo flares. So did
she kind of went through that, and kind of explained that, how to say, one of the focuses that she was saying was like, look, I don't know if you heard of the dims and the sims, like the dangers in me and like the safeties in me. That's how she kind of explained it to me as well. And finding things that, you know, if you are kind of in that trigger and that high point, you know, finding things that are just going to make you feel a little bit better, whether that be, you know, a favorite DVD or movie that you have in the form of a DVD, because you know who watches DVDs these days. But you know, like a favorite movie that you could just turn on, and then like, you know, some food, like a special snack, whether it be like dried fruit or chocolate or and just those things that just to help bring that level down. You know, little mechanisms like that just to help out. And I think one of the first things that she recognized that I was doing that maybe wasn't the best for my body was, you know, I had this pain, but I have a tendency to like just like try and think and stretch it out. Because for me, I thought, you know, that was what's going to give me relief. And she's like, just hold up on that one. Take it easy. Maybe not when you're like feeling that bad. You can do it maybe when you're feeling good, but not when you're already at that level. So I think that's kind of similar to the whole pacing thing, like where, you know, don't overdo what you think you should be able to do.
Yeah. And so do you have a particular message of hope that you would like to share with the endo community?
I guess that just that endo is becoming, like, the awareness of it is getting better, and there is so much more funding going towards research for it. You know, I think even the diagnosis of it is starting to like the time it's taken to diagnose it is starting to, just because there is this awareness. So I think that for me is sort of the message of hope, is just that, you know, things are going to get better. It may take some time, but you know, it's progress. I guess, and also just this whole thing about, you know, finding these things that work for you. It may take time, but there is going to be something that, you know, works for you. And it's just there. I mean, like we said, there are so many different little things that it may be a combination of them, or it might just be that one thing. But you know, it is out there. Yeah.
And you support, is it support?
Yes, we do a lot of support for endo. So my skincare business, Enbacci, we hold high teas, you know, when we don't have COVID restrictions. So we do the whole...
Location, where are you from?
So we're in Melbourne. So the last 2 years have been a bit of a nut. So we had a high tea. We try and do, like, you know, the endo high teas in March. At the end of March, where we raise money and funds. And it's actually quite amazing to see the number of people that want to donate items for, you know, your, you know, silent auctions and things like that, just to help raise that money. So there's a real community behind it. So we often do also like specialized products where we will donate a certain amount of proceeds to Endo Australia as well. And on top of that, my husband is going to be running in Run Melbourne in next month, and he and a friend are currently trying to raise money for Endo Australia as well. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. I love that you have you know, things in your business life and also personal life that help support the endo community. That's really cool.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, it's had a big impact on my life. Like, you don't want to say it has, but it's the reason why, you know, I have a family of my own, so to say, now. So I guess, you know, you can look at it as a negative, where, you know, you're filled with pain and so much of your time and effort is spent on it. But at the same time, like, I'm really lucky and I'm very thankful that I have this as well, that it gave me the opportunity to have the family I wanted. And for me, I don't think I know I'll never regret that. I'll never regret having a child earlier, because I have my child. So
yeah. And you never know the impact that by you sharing that from your business and from your personal life, you never know the impact. It only takes one woman to think, hang on a minute, I have a lot of pain, maybe I have that. And then that starts on the pathway of trying to get further investigations. You just...
Most definitely. Again, yeah, no, it's just making people aware that this is something. And it's also making partners aware as well, you know, partners of people who have endo. So yeah, the more awareness that's out there, the more people go, oh yeah, maybe I have it too. And yeah.
Yeah, and keep sharing them.
Exactly.
Yes. So is there anything else that you would like to share?
I guess one thing we sort of touched on as well is about how expensive it can be. And one thing that I'm very thankful that I had access to was, you know, all the doctors that I needed. For women with endo or with something like, you know, just getting something like private health insurance, I think helps so much financially. You know, a lot of the times, you know, if you are having contraceptive pills as well, like solely a certain amount you can actually claim back through your private health. So little things like that, you know, we take for granted. We take for granted the private health, how much that can actually give back to us.
Important, and I often say that to women, is that if they say, should I get private health, I always say yes, because endo is a chronic disease. You're going to have this for the rest of your life, and often a lot of the more advanced trained specialists do work privately, and some do work public, but then even if you go public, the wait times can
wait time is horrendous.
Wait times are huge, and it can be, and then because of COVID and the pandemic, those wait times have been extended. You can wait 2 years for surgery, and
who knows how your endo is going to react in those 2 years as well.
How do you do that? Like, then it affects your work and your personal life and your social life, on top of how much it already affects it. You just can't wait 2 years for surgery. So yes, I definitely agree with the private health.
And I guess if you are also planning a family in the future as well, making sure that your private health covers that fertility as well, because there are some private health that doesn't cover like IVF treatment. If you know that you have endo, I think it's always a smart idea to maybe include that in there, because you don't know how severe your endo or what impact that's going to have on your body. So yeah.
Definitely good points. Thank you for sharing your story and your messages of hope. I've loved having a chat with you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dee. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Bye.
Bye.